In October of 2016, Team Fortress 2 will turn 9 years old. That's right, the game is older than your average sniper main. We're not above those easy jokes here. You know, we've seen plenty of changes to all those weapon unlocks, but since the game's release, there's been a whole lot of changes to the base of each class. The stock weapons, the characters themselves, the basic mechanics. After almost a decade, have you ever wondered which class was the most buffed? I hope so, because that's this video. You clicked on the video, the title is clearly labeled. Okay, let's start. Just to be very clear here, so nobody's confused, we're talking about default everything, the core of the class. And Demoman came in dead last. Not only has stock Demo not received many buffs, he's gotten quite a few nerfs. But hang on, hold up, that doesn't mean Demoman is the weakest class, that's obviously very far from the truth. He can be incredibly powerful, and in 2007, too powerful. I think you'd have a bit of a hard time arguing that the original version of Demoman was not at least a little bit overpowered. What changed? Well, let's take a look. First off, and this is from the game's beta, so it doesn't really count, but I think it's at least worth noting. The grenade launcher's clip size was reduced from 6 to 4, which is why it still has 6 chambers. And way back, the grenade launcher also carried 30 additional ammo, until it was cut almost in half to the 16 it is today. That's a pretty big downgrade. But it's not all bad for grenades, because they removed a rather funky mechanic where grenades would only do full damage if they hit closer to your enemy's feet. I honestly didn't even know this mechanic existed until I saw that it was removed. Probably because damage spread used to be a thing, which kind of made all damage pretty wonky. Grenades did used to have a slightly larger explosion radius than soldiers' rockets, but it has since been reduced to equal size. And just like the grenade launcher, the sticky bomb launcher used to carry much more ammo. It was reduced from 40 to 24. The maximum damage ramp-up of sticky bombs was reduced from 150% to 120%. This means close-range bombs were capable of dealing even more damage than they do now. But at one point, sticky bombs were given an additional kind of ramp-up where they would not reach full damage for 2 seconds after being fired. And this one was a huge nerf, and a lot of people complained, and it was one of the few changes to be reverted only a few days after it was added. Later, to replace that damage ramp-up, they added explosion radius ramp-up for airborne stickies. And finally, sticky bombs were given the same explosion size reduction as grenades, so they went from being larger than rockets to the same size as rockets. Yeah, that's a lot of nerfs. But realistically, all of the ones not reverted were, in my opinion, justified. Demoman is still really good, just updates have not been so kind to him. But he's not alone, the next 2 classes have also been nerfed. And now we're on to the other explosive class of the Soldier. Just like how Demo got his max ammo reduced, Soldier did too, reducing the carried ammo of the rocket launcher from 36 to just 16. But it was later raised to the 20 it is now, so that's not that bad, I guess. And at number 7, if this was numbered, is it numbered? It's numbered. The Sniper is number 7. The Sniper's sniper rifle was given a small 0.2 second delay before a scope shot could headshot. A small amount of time, but that could make a difference. Even 0.2 seconds is kind of a lot of time in a game like TF2. Scout! Scout has not received any real changes to his stock weapons or their general abilities, so good for him. I'm happy for you, buddy. You know, a lot of whiny babies, people like me, complain about how heavy only gets nerfs or gets ignored all the time. But if you just go back 6 years, he was getting buffs. Heavy's minigun used to spin up 25% slower than it does now. So imagine the stock spinning up almost as slow as the Natasha currently does. And he also used to move even slower while spun up, by about 10%, going from a 27% move speed while revved to a 37% one. But Heavy's time of buffs was short-lived. Later on, all miniguns would receive a 1-second damage and accuracy ramp-up after firing. This happened at the same time as the reverted sticky nerf I mentioned earlier. Hey, maybe revert this one too. Maybe. It's only been over 2 years. They probably reverted the Demoman one because Demo's a 6's class and nobody plays Heavy. Oh. The Medic was the first class to be given a class update because, while he wasn't necessarily underpowered, he was generally unsatisfying to play. Medic was the least played class at the time, and while he isn't the most popular class for casual players, he has gotten some pretty nice buffs since the game came out. But first, an early nerf had your Uber drain 50% faster for each additional target. The Uber effect lingers for a little bit after you take your medigun off someone, so I suppose it drains faster during that time. But other than that, it's Buff City over here. During setup time, mediguns build Uber 3 times faster. Not incredibly important, but if you left the room to get some crackers or something during setup, it's all good. You can just put that medigun on someone and get that Uber real quick. Hooray. And next we've got a relatively recent change. All mediguns allow you to match the speed of a faster heal target, which mostly just boils down to scouts and the occasional Islander Demoman. But it's still a good change. So you know how the Blue Sucker makes your self-heal less? That sorta used to be the medic's default health regen. The amount the medic self-heals is dependent on when he was last damaged, but it used to start at 1 health a second and increase to 6 over time. So the minimum health regeneration was increased from 1 to 3. That's what I was getting at there. Got it? Yeah, that's good. And finally, another semi-recent one. The medic's self-health regeneration is slightly higher when he's healing an injured patient. Honestly, it's not super noticeable in-game, but it's still helpful, I'm sure. Stock Spy is the only class not to receive any nerfs with his buffs, as far as I know. Well, there was actually one. For a short time, the knife's backstab radius was reduced from 180 degrees to 160 degrees. So you couldn't quite get away with shanking someone's shoulder. That's a hard sentence to say. So you couldn't quite get away with shanking some's shoulder. Shanking someone's shoulder. So you couldn't quite get away with shanking someone's shoulder.
So you couldn't quite get away with shanking someone's shoulder and having it go to the backstab.
Thank you, Sean Connery, for that amazing reading. That was him. He's in the studio. He's my best friend.
But that was reverted pretty quickly. Now you can shank away and get that stab. And of course, you've got the gunmetal buffs, the 20% damage reduction and debuff timer reduction while cloaked. And the Spy's base movement speed was increased from 100% to 107% not too long ago. The only time we've seen a class's base movement speed increased. Pretty rad, pretty radical. So sapped buildings have a damage resistance against the Spy who sapped them, but that was reduced from 66% to 33%, so 2/3 to 1/3 reduction. Alright. And if that sapper is destroyed, it now adds a half a second delay before the building reactivates. But hey, it's not all bad for the engineer. It's because he's next. That's why, if you were wondering, because he got lots of buffs. Anyway, the engineer. The engineer has received a few nerfs and some somewhat indirect ones with Spy sapper buffs, but the magnitude of his buffs are pretty huge. Originally, hitting a constructing building with your wrench would only increase the construct speed by 2 times. It has since been increased to 2.5 times. But that did come at the cost of repair costing more, from 5 HP per metal to 3. Until this was adjusted, I'm not sure anyone even knew this stat existed. From what I recall, it was absent from the wiki and no one ever talked about it. But level 2 and level 3 sentries have a minigun damage resistance. It was reduced from 20% to 15% on level 2 and from 33% to 20% on level 3. And for 2 of the biggest buffs, not just to the engineer, but to any class in the game ever. Dispensers and teleporters gain the ability to be upgraded, originally only capable of being level 1. And engineer can pick up his own buildings. Seems pretty obvious now, but originally you were stuck where you were. Speaking of hauling, the original haul speed penalty was minus 25%, but it was reduced to just 10%. Yeah, you used to be slower than heavy while carrying those buildings, and now you're closer to demo. And dispensers and teleporters used to redeploy really slowly, but it was increased by 50%, so that took a couple seconds off the time. They're still not as fast as a sentry, but they're faster. And recently, the cost of teleporters was cut by more than half, going from 125 metal to just 50. Engineer has received some pretty major buffs that put the other classes to shame. But who? Who could possibly top that? Who is the mysterious final 9th class? I know you're all at the edge of your seats. The answer may shock and surprise you. Yeah, it's Pyro. Yeah. Oh boy. Now don't chalk this up as meaning Pyro is the best, the most powerful. It's really just more of a testament to how much worse the Pyro used to be. First off, Air Blast. that wasn't always a thing. I think that just speaks for itself. That means the Pyro couldn't block Ubers or get any follow-ups out of Air Blast or extinguish teammates or reflect anything. There wasn't a whole lot Pyro could do. Air Blast itself has received a lot of buffs. The delay between when you could use them used to be 25% longer. And Air Blast used to cost 25 metal instead of 20. And reflected projectiles didn't mini-crit. And it didn't even originally extinguish teammates. And extinguishing teammates didn't give 20 health. But to compensate for the initial round of Air Blast buffs, the Flamethrower's fire underwent a few downgrades. The direct damage was reduced by 20%. But this was reverted over the course of 2 later updates, with both of those updates increasing the damage by 10%. And the afterburn duration was also reduced from 10 seconds to 6. But yeah, that also got reverted, so... Originally, the Flamethrower's short range was made even worse by the amount of damage fall-off it suffered from. The max fall-off used to be 25%. That's really bad. That means it would do minus 75% damage at the max range. At one point, it was removed entirely, but now it's 70%, so not too bad. And another one, direct fire damage now reduces medigun healing by 25%. The only nerf to have stuck was the consecutive air blast no longer blocks air strafing. Previously, all air blasts would block the target from air strafing midair. I've said it before, but when you have a change as big as Air Blast, it doesn't just affect the way Pyro plays, but it affects the way every class has to fight one. And that's why Pyro was first. Pyro won. This was a contest now. Pyro's the greatest class of all time.